Heidi, are you there, Heidi?
Yes, I'm here.
Is Bruce Groves off the list?
He's
I'm
on the
here.
list. He's right
He's here.
there.
He's right
I'm
there.
here.
Him
Okay.
and Eric
I'm right
are
here.
there, and they're speaking.
Okay, they're together. I see. I see.
Oh, they're
Sorry.
together. Okay, that's what I want to make sure.
Sorry.
One
Already-
has PowerPoints, one does not.
Are we ready?
We
Eric
are,
and Bruce?
Heidi,
I'm
are
ready.
you going to do the PowerPoints or am I going to take over?
you're gonna,
You can do it for the ease, but I have them if you need me to.
Okay, I
Right.
can do it. I can do it.
okay, so, the chair, I directed to the chair. I just want to remind the speaker, you have 20 minutes, and as soon as the chair is done, I will say 20 minutes on, okay?
All right.
Okay.
Well, I'm
then.
Eric. Great.
Our next speakers are Engineering and Land Planning Associates, Managing Fugitive Dust in Construction and Remediation. The presenters are Eric Reyes. Is that how you say it, Reyes?
Yes.
Okay. He's the founder and president of Engineering and Land Planning Associates with nearly 30 years experience as a civil and environmental engineer. He has extensive experience, including expert testimony in all aspects of civil and environmental engineering, from phase one environmental assessments to complicated bioremediation projects. Also to land development, professional planning, and site plan approvals. In addition, Mr. Reyes has extensive experience in forensic investigations in support of litigation and cost allocation negotiations and risk management, strategy development and implementation for several foundries, large paint, coal tar sealant, and metal fabrication manufacturing facilities in New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. Mr. Reyes also has achieved his professional engineering, professional planning, and licensed site remediation licenses in the state of New Jersey. He's a member of the Interstate Technology Regulatory Council and is one of the lead authors on the forthcoming ITRC guidance document for environmental molecular diagnostics. In addition, Mr. Reyes has designed and implemented numerous source removal systems, including but not limited to enhanced bioremediation, in situ chemical oxidation, groundwater extraction treatment systems, soil vapor extraction, and air sparging. These source removal systems have been combined with monitor natural attenuation programs or engineered enhanced natural attenuation programs to address residual constituents dissolved in groundwater and to expedite regulatory case closure. In addition, we have Bruce Groves. Mr. Groves has more than 35 years of industrial hygiene, safety, loss control, environmental management experience. His key experience includes conducting environmental and health, developing and implementing worker and community air sampling programs, designing and developing computerized networks to integrate real-time environmental, air, noise, radiation, weather monitoring at construction, hazardous waste, and industrial commercial sites, directing, evaluating, and auditing the EPA and OSHA regulatory activities, providing expert witness for support and testimony on environmental, industrial, hygiene, and OSHA compliance issues, developing air and environmental sample landfill,
okay.
natural gas plant sites, active and abandoned industrial sites, and DOD, DOE, and CER, CLA designated sites, developing and directing projects in industrial hygiene and safety for construction firms, manufacturing and utility companies, and in commercial buildings.
All right.
Miss, go ahead,
Okay, I'm just saying it's time.
Mr. Groves.
Go ahead. We got 5 minutes. I mean, we want to move forward at this point in time.
These guys are overachievers, so I have to, give them their
Well,
credits.
Well, that's the one I wrote the time that they have.
Yeah,
All
we
right.
can leave it. We can leave it at that.
Okay, you're good?
We're
All
good.
right, well,
We're good.
we're very well qualified. Here are our speakers today. You got the floor. Go ahead.
Eric?
Eric? Bruce? Eric?
I'm here, but Eric?
Eric's on mute.
Unmute, Eric.
He's, okay. We're,
Apologize. I've been on all morning. I haven't had a Wi-Fi issue, and now I have a Wi-Fi issue.
it does limit your time, but please.
I'll speak quick. So I'm here today with Bruce Groves, as you've mentioned, from Emilcott Associates, to discuss controlling dust on construction sites and when air monitoring and potential controls are necessary. In 2008, the legislation promulgated the Site Remediation Reform Act, empowering NJDEP to establish regulations to administer environmental risk assessment and mitigation where necessary. The Act also established the requirements for licensed site remediation professionals, such as myself, whose highest obligation is to protect human health and the environment. I'm here today to discuss the existing processes that LSRPs use to assess potential environmental-based exposure scenarios as they pertain to fugitive dust. We can all agree that fugitive dust is a nuisance. There is a precedence within NJDEP regulations and guidance for nuisance-based conditions. The state drinking water standards set qualitative acceptable levels for chemicals in our drinking water based on many factors: toxicity, exposure timeframes, and concentrations, to name a few. They also establish secondary standards for nuisance-based compounds. These are non-enforceable guidelines relating to contaminants that may cause cosmetic or aesthetic effects, such as poor taste, odor, color. Some of these compounds are aluminum, sulfur, just turbidity, total suspended solids and dissolved solids in the water. Is dust just a secondary nuisance, or is it something more here in New Jersey? I'm here to discuss the process that I use to make that assessment. Almost all properties that are set for development undergo some form of site evaluation to assess the potential environmental risks, not only in soil and groundwater, but also within air, and that includes fugitive dust. To assess fugitive dust risks, we start with evaluating the composition of the soil to be disturbed. We review the site history. Was it industrial use? Is it within an area of known historic fill development, which contain most likely contaminants? We then proceed to inspection of that soil and often physical sampling and laboratory analysis to determine if it's contaminated. The confirmation that a soil to be disturbed contains particulates that are less than desirable does not automatically require mitigation, but may require more testing and the implementation of many of the best management practices already used for dust control. When additional assessment is required, we bring in experts such as Bruce Groves to further assess what actions are required to ensure protection of human health and environment throughout the development process. I'd like to hand it off to Bruce for site discussion where we suspect that the soils could have particulates and to further discuss what actions he takes from an assessment and ultimately mitigation to control. So Bruce, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Heidi, could you share my slides? I'm having difficulty here. So to give a little background on who I am and what Emilcott is, we are in the air monitoring, real-time air monitoring exposure assessment business, and Emilcott's been around, has about 50 people and been around for 34 years. We probably have done 1,000 projects, of which probably the majority are New Jersey. And we currently have 140 air stations looking at particulate matter today as we speak in real-time monitoring. So we've got a million or 2 million hours of air monitoring data out there, and we're practitioners. So the one thing I got to say, and I'm also on the committee, I listened to Joanne's talk that we're both on the Perimeter Air Monitoring Guidance Committee for the DEP, which really focuses on hazardous or contaminated type sites. But one of the things I think we can acknowledge listening to everybody's talk this morning is fugitive dust is an issue, and it's a health issue. I don't think anybody's going to argue this. What we want to really slice and dice a little bit and make sure that everyone realizes that there are actions being taken by various associations, and I'm talking this morning about, or this afternoon, about the New Jersey Builders Association, and some of the activities that they are taking proactively and have been for many, many years, to not be kind of put into the same boat that every emission source, every location has to have the same amount of concern, because some are not being handled, many are. So if you could get to the next slide, Heidi, if that's possible. Just kind of an overview is the real emphasis in the residential and the construction industry is source control, and this is a major part, and where the majority of these developments are not on hazardous sites, greenfield type sites, if you want to put it that, where the responsible construction practices is to make sure we implement work practices to avoid dust emissions. You don't sandblast outside, as someone mentioned earlier. You implement effective dust controls, and as you see, water is used to try to reduce, especially when you're dealing with vehicles, diesel emissions, policies to try to make sure that that doesn't become an issue. So this is a major point from an emissions dust control that can be done to reduce emissions. Next slide. Now, when there is construction, as Eric goes, on potentially contaminated sites, one of the things that I think is important for the council to recognize, and I think it's an important decision-making step, is that somebody has to evaluate to determine if traditional dust control methods are effective or sufficient or not. And when you start looking at what is that process, you really do have to bring in people that are competent and qualified to do this. And the process is called a conceptual site model. And this is the kind of building block of any type of work that's being done to try to determine if the potential source emissions are additive or become a health risk standpoint to whatever community you're involved with. If you next slide, Heidi. All right, this is a complicated slide, but anyone who has been in the kind of the environmental exposure business, whether it's water or soil or air, it gets involved in the conceptual site model, and it's in practice today, where you are making sure that you look at what are you dealing with here? And we had a number of slides. Dr. Lumbach, who's talked about the number of the different chemicals involved or different potential contaminants, different levels of what chemicals of concern are there, how are they transported. You want to make sure that you understand, as we talked about, not just source and fate, but we also talk about duration and dose. And this is quantifying what would be a potential exposure to any anticipated contaminants of concern. And then you focus on the inhalation exposure route. And of course, a big part of this is not just people on site that are working, but also obviously their neighbors. It's a whole different situation when you start talking about the waterfront of Camden and residential neighbors being across the street versus me being in semi-rural or rural or suburban areas where you may not have the potential offsite impacts that you would have there. And the whole process of this conceptual site model is to really drive a decision-making step to say, well, is our conventional dust emission control systems, are they sufficient to make this a safe construction operation, or do we have to do more? And that's the decision, potential decision, in developing what is known as a perimeter monitoring plan. This is where you start to monitor and to ensure that whatever controls, and the monitoring program isn't controlling anything. What you're doing is the monitoring program is validating that whatever controls and work practices that are in place are actually doing whatever they're supposed to be doing, meeting whatever health risk thresholds that have been established. So that's the cornerstone of what is being done in the building construction areas when you start dealing with potential contaminated sites or sites that could potentially have some sort of hazardous air pollutant that could be involved, is to have a conceptual site model. And it's a formal process. It's not just done off the back of the envelope. It's also done and documented as part of any type of responsible construction. Next slide. Hi. So what are the challenges and changes, changes and challenges in construction? Is the first, it's important to recognize that we're not promoting that air monitoring is required for every type of construction operation. It's not necessary. It's something that is only needed when you do go through a conceptual site model where you may or may not need air monitoring. You always need dust controls. You always need source emission controls. But if air monitoring is required, you want to make sure that this perimeter monitoring program the air monitoring program is based on the conceptual site model. And you click into a number of the processes you would do in any sort of type of perimeter monitoring program where you use health-based air criteria. We are proponents of real-time monitoring supported by analytical monitoring. So it's the process where perimeter air monitoring is a real-time monitoring, because that's how you can really take some affirmative action in making sure your controls are being effective. And you also want to make sure that you're dealing with, beyond fugitive dust, you're also dealing with other issues like odors. So, Heidi? And that's for the most part the 60,000 foot version of some of the activities that are occurring on these construction sites. Thank you.
Do we have any comments or questions from the council? Hello? We're pretty much on time. Thank you, gentlemen, for that presentation. Doesn't appear to be any comments or questions for you at this time. So we'll move into our next presenter, Kyle England. He's going to do a presentation on concrete and clean air. Kyle England joined the firm of CLB Partners as associate in January 2019, focusing on legislative and industry analysis while maintaining his role on the staff of the New Jersey Concrete and Aggregate Association. Before his work in the industry, Kyle led grassroots campaign efforts for several local and county candidates. Mr. England holds a BA in Law and Justice Studies with a minor in Communications from Rowan University. Are you there, Kyle?
You're muted. Kyle, you need to unmute, please. Just unmute on the computer. You'll see a bar on the lower, and the camera's on, but we need to hear you.
We unmute him?
Can we unmute him? I guess who's directing? I don't have.
Kyle?
We're trying to unmute him right now, but I think he's muted on his side. He has to unmute.
Yeah, I think, Kyle, you'll have to go into your preferences and make sure that the mic is either for your headphones or for your computer top. No, we still can't hear you. Sorry. If you go up to volume on the top of your computer, it will tell you what speakers you are using. If you're using a Mac, I'm not sure if you're using a Mac or a PC. If you're using a Mac, you can go up there and go to sound preferences, and it will let you choose the the audio input. If not, I'll let you try it. Maybe we will jump to the next speaker if you wish.
Would you like to do that? Well, and come back to Kyle if he can get squared away?
And if he can't log in, he might be able to call in using the number and presenting at the same time.
That's true, Heidi. Thank you.
Did you hear that, Kyle? Shake your head yes.
So you want to try that now? You want to call in? Give me a thumbs up. You want to? Okay, thumbs up. Call in. You want? Give a call now.
We'll wait for him.
Yes, we will
Wait a
give him
minute.
due time.
I don't want to cut anyone off because of.
No, it's a technical. We're trying to maintain, and we have a few minutes that the prior speakers gave us. So
Yeah, we're good.
you have the do you have the phone? No, you don't. Oh, let's put Heidi. Can you give him the phone number in the chat, please? Kyle, were you able to click on the picture, your own picture, and someone made a comment that you click on your picture and the control bar comes up. But here's Frank actually gave you the telephone number here and the meeting number. 856-338-7074. We're waiting, no problem. Take your time. I know it's stressful. You're on the air. We don't want to skip anybody. We want to give everybody their due time. Though I will end it if it if you go too far. No, you're doing fine. You'll do fine.
Just don't give him the hook, Dr. B. Give him a chance.
No, we still can't hear you. You have the meeting number 217-31108, and you have to hit the hashtag to dial in. We still can't hear you. Interesting. Why is this man unable to?
Kyle can hear us.
He can hear us. He gives us a thumbs up. He definitely knows it. Yeah, he's shaking his head.
So Kyle, when you call in, you are muted. So try *6 to unmute.
Oh.
There you go. You're unmuted.
Wow. Sorry, guys.
So let's just want to give you some additional time. It's 12:20. You're supposed to start at 12:20, but
Okay.
technical.
Hey, Kyle.
Else,
Kyle, this is
mute.
Mike Egginson. You might want to turn the volume down on your computer. You're echoing.
How's that? A little better?
That's a lot better. There you go. You're
All right. Man, you guys got me red. Sorry about that.
All right, you're with us, Kyle.
All right, wonderful. I can hear you guys. You can hear me, right?
Kyle England joined the firm of CLB Partners as associate in January 2019, focusing on legislative and industrial analysis while maintaining his role and staff of the New Jersey Concrete and Aggregate Association. Before his work in the industry, Kyle led grassroots campaign efforts for several local and county candidates. He holds a BA in Law and Justice Studies with a minor in Communications from Rowan. You've got the floor, Kyle.
Thank you very much. Heidi, if you don't mind, I have a PowerPoint as well.
Heidi, can you share Kyle's presentation for him? Oh, you got it. Awesome.
I'm supposed to be the young guy here, now with the technology too.
And we're in good shape.
Can you see it?
I can see it. I don't know if it's a full screen.
Yeah, we see the preview from your file list, Heidi.
Yeah.
You might have
No,
to reshare.
Hold on, I gotta, yeah.
Looks good.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your patience, guys. I apologize again. So my name's Kyle England. I work with the New Jersey Concrete and Aggregate Association. Today I'll give you just a quick look at our industry and some of the practices we use to combat fugitive dust.
Oh.
All right, so just a quick introduction. Who is the NJCAA? The Concrete and Aggregate Association, we represent individuals, firms, and corporations that engage in the production and marketing of ready-mix concrete and aggregates. The association includes members who manufacture equipment, materials, or provide services to the concrete industry and concrete contractors. Our association consists of approximately 200 members, and we represent about 20,000 jobs across the state. So first things first, why do we need concrete? Concrete is the most widely used building material on the planet and in the state. And also of note, it's the most widely used substance on the planet, second to water. Homes, bridges, roads, buildings, you name it, we're in it. Contrary to popular belief, some important note, concrete and cement are not the same thing. Cement is actually just a component of concrete. Concrete is made up of three basic components: water, that's cement, and aggregates, which includes rock, sand, and gravel that gets added to the mixture. Cement is usually in powder form. It acts as a binding agent when mixed with water and aggregates, and that combination, or the concrete mix, will be poured and hardened into a durable material, which we all know. So also, another important note, these products must be locally sourced and produced. Because the material hardens, concrete's actually a perishable product with a short duration. So it's really a big game of time between getting that product from the plant to the job site before it hardens. The supported materials must come from local production in order to reduce pollution from on-road transport, as well as reducing material costs. So we have about 125 concrete plants in the state and approximately 80 aggregate facilities in New Jersey. Those are stone quarries, which we usually find in North Jersey, and sand and gravel mines, typically in southern New Jersey. New Jersey is also home to many concrete product facilities, such as paver plants and block plants. Going off of my discussion on cement, there are no cement plants in New Jersey, only concrete. Cement production is a known major contributor to air pollution, and this production happens out of state and must be transported in state. So how do concrete plants and aggregate mines potentially affect air quality? Concrete plants and aggregate facilities produce air emissions two ways: through process sources and fugitive sources. The process sources come from the plants themselves. Fugitive sources, obviously, from stockpiles and unpaved surfaces like we've discussed. And as Mr. Ratzman highlighted in his first presentation, and as we've been discussing, much of this is wind blown. So it's very wind dependent. The process sources are controlled by equipment, and we have very high control efficiencies, often over 99%. Fugitive sources are controlled by best practices, as we've discussed, such as water sprays, sprinklers, wind blocks, and sweeping techniques. What pollutants are emitted? Dust. Solid particulate particles, usually from the aggregates, both through process and fugitive sources. Cement is typically not emitted on site, since it's a highly expensive concrete component and often stored in on-site storage silos and processed within the concrete plant to be added to the concrete mix before it leaves the plant. So some regulatory adaptations of our industry. Concrete and aggregate facilities are required to obtain air permits through the DEP. This includes both process and fugitive source emissions. It requires controls on emissions, and they include standards such as opacity and visual emissions for test. So with that, some strategies we engage in. Practices utilized to control fugitive emissions include water sprays. If you view the picture on the right, that is a water spray at a facility. It quite literally shoots water into the air to knock down any dust particles that would have been released. Along those lines, sprinkler systems, material enclosures, again, very wind dependent, covering materials, screening buffers, watering down roadways, and also anti-tracking and wheel wash practices prior to leaving the site, and more. So with that, just some quick recommendations for your annual report. Existing state and federal permitting appears sufficient. But with that, maybe better education for permittees and regulators with regards to visual emissions testing and relevance to operations. Maybe some greater latitude in use of fugitive dust controls, such as roadway surfacing agents, and just continuing to improve collaboration between DEP air quality and water quality divisions, just so that air control practices involving the use of water don't automatically become prohibitive, my apologies, water quality concerns. And with that, I just want to thank you guys. Pleasure to be here. If anyone has any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to me or our Executive Director, Bill Layton, who I am here for today.
Council members, any questions, comments?
Yeah, I have a question. It's John Valeri. One of the things we talked about at the beginning of this was the inherent conflict of, the use of water as a dust control, which would help on the air side, and potentially that water becoming a discharge. I don't know, Kyle, if you can answer this or if you can't now present it as part of comments you want to submit, but I am concerned about that tension that, end up becoming a no good deed goes unpunished type of recommendation. We say spray it and then find out we're causing water pollution. What are you folks doing, if you know, to control the water discharges when you do the spraying?
So I don't have that fact right now, but I'd be glad to reach out to more industry leaders and reconvene and be able to answer that before the comment period ends.
Okay, thank you.
I apologize. Of course.
That would be great. This is Lem Yeller. I am the allergist, immunologist on the council and vice chair. But the question I have, maybe I have to go back to basics. I didn't overhear cement versus concrete. The difference is exactly what, and what are the particulate differences?
So cement just being essentially a piece of the recipe in concrete.
Right.
Cement is developed off-site out of New Jersey, since we don't have any cement plants, transported in, added to the recipe between aggregates, cement, and water. So
that concrete would have more different particulates involved in it than cement, because it includes cement.
Yeah.
Do we know what is dispersed? Do you have any, or are you, again, like what John has reflected, you can submit after period, what is the dispersal of particulates associated with the concrete?
I'd love to have a better answer for you. I can reach out to many of my periods and try to get back to you guys.
That's perfect. That's why we have a public hearing and then a follow-up. That's good. Thank you very much.
Hey, Mayor and Len, it's Mike Egginson. Could I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Kyle, appreciate you being here and, extend my appreciations to your folks for participating. Do you guys ever, like we do at my association, the State Chamber, we always reach out to other chambers beyond our borders with the U.S. Chamber and our local regional chambers in state as well as outside with other state chambers. Do you guys do that? Do you have like benchmarking and do you share best practices with your neighboring states on, how you produce the materials and, the content of this hearing today? Do you ever engage, what's going on in the industry beyond New Jersey borders?
As far as I know, yes. I believe we're trying to collaborate with a lot of other states. We do work. One of our biggest facilitators, Sylvie Concrete, works throughout the tri-state area. So it's not just only in New Jersey that we focus. So we do have concrete plants that we work with in Pennsylvania as well. So it's a lot of that sharing of information too.
Good. Yeah. Obviously we know on the council that air quality doesn't, we don't have a wall surrounding New Jersey. It impacts the region. So that's why I kind of bring it up. Like if there's a collaborative with your association, with PA and New York and the like. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you, Kyle. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Have a great day, guys.
You're welcome.
I'll be on.
Our next presenter is Gary Sondermeyer from the Bayshore family of companies on fugitive emission control in the recycling industry. Gary's Vice President of Operations of the Bayshore family of companies. And New Jersey Bayshore is one of New Jersey's largest recyclers, managing 9 separate recycling operations on its 58-acre campus. Gary assists in the management facility operations toward the corporate vision of running 100% green businesses and powered 100% by renewable energy. Gary also serves as Vice Chair of Sustainable Jersey, Co-Chair of New Jersey Climate Alliance, Co-Chair of North Jersey Transportation Planning Authorities and Resilient Task Force. New Jersey Recyclers. Gary has an undergraduate master's degree in environmental planning from Rutgers University. Gary, you've got the floor.
Thank you very much. I don't know if Heidi, I'm not seeing a button to push the share screen.
The share screen should be on your panel next to your microphone.
Yeah, I do have a tray. It says open share tray. Will that work?
That should be it.
That should be it.
Can you see my presentation?
Not yet.
Okay. I need some help then.
Okay, Gary, why don't you pull up Gary's presentation,
Right.
and we'll advance it for you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Sorry for the delay here.
Okay.
Normally there's just a button and it's just not appearing.
No problem. We'll wait and we'll start the clock accordingly and give you the proper time.
Thank you very much. And let me say right away, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. And for my 30 years with the DEP, the Clean Air Council has always represented the gold standard for the 50 some odd advisory councils and bodies that serve the commissioner and the governor. And certainly today's proceeding lived up to that standard. I think it's been terrific, and I want to thank you again for the opportunity and compliment all the other speakers. I think this has been a fascinating proceeding. So I can begin, I guess, right? You can see it now?
You certainly can, sir. You have 20 minutes.
So we'll say Heidi to the rescue. Thank you, Heidi. Can you advance, please? So I'd like to start with the summary and conclusion. And today I'm speaking for Bayshore Recycling, but also generally, at least, for the recycling industry in New Jersey. We are very heavily regulated, the Class B facilities. From a societal benefit standpoint, I want to point out that the materials we process are the most highly recycled materials in the country at a 74% recycling rate for concrete in particular, and asphalt C&D materials. Also, from a sustainable materials management standpoint, we bring substantial environmental greenhouse gas emission reduction, economic and job creation benefits. We are under requirements for continuous dust control. It's a very clear requirement for any fugitive source emissions that we have. We are regulated through the Division of Solid and Hazardous Waste, through air permitting, through stormwater management, and federal OSHA. And through those regulations and beyond the regulations, we apply many on-site and off-site best management practices, which I'd like to quickly summarize for you. We also have strict monitoring requirements, and inspection is a very regular activity at all the Class B facilities. And as a punchline conclusion, we really don't feel that there are additional fugitive dust requirements that are necessary. It's really a matter of facilities complying with the standards that are already in place. And of course, the check and balance that's offered by DEP compliance and enforcement and the CHA agencies. Next, please. There are 4 classes of recycling facilities in the state. I'm not going to go through them. They're A, B, C, and D. We're really talking about Class B material, which is the processing primarily of concrete, asphalt, brick, and block. Next, please. Just to give you a sense of the universe in the state, Class B facilities are about, actually I got this, I had updated my slide, but not this one. There are actually, I updated my numbers through the Division of Solid and Hazardous Waste. There are 98 operating Class Bs in the state, 82 apply concrete and asphalt recycling, and all 82 actually do operate on-site crushers. Next, please. In terms of Class B regulation, I mentioned this generally. Our core document is a recycling center approval that comes from the Division of Solid and Hazardous Waste. It is a very rigorous approval. There's a difference. Solid waste facilities are given permits, recycling facilities approvals. They're really substantively the same. We have 40 general provisions we have to comply with and 45 additional conditions. And these 85 provisions are applicable to all Class B recycling facilities. We also are regulated by air quality regulation, either through Title V or pre-construction permitting. Bayshore is somewhat unusual due to the size and diversity of our operations, so we do operate under a Title V permit, but most are pre-construction permits. Stormwater management is very important to our operations, and we do have, as Dan had highlighted in his earlier remarks, an individual permit and a facility-wide pollution prevention plan. And we also are under OSHA worker safety requirements. Next, please. In terms of, again, societal benefit, and I'll just go through this very quickly, construction demolition debris estimated through EPA, about 600 million tons generated in the last data reporting year, which was 2018. The composition of that is 68% roughly is concrete, another 18% a mixture of concrete and asphalt. So about 85% is really what we're processing at a facility like Bayshore, concrete and asphalt. Our recovery rate of recycling is about 74%, predominantly in the manufacture of aggregate products used in road-based construction and other manufactured products in construction. Next, please. For Bayshore, as mentioned in my introduction, we operate 9 different recycling operations at one facility. We're really talking about the Class B activity for recycling of buildings, roads, parking lots, and bridges. And we have, we're very conscious of our impact to the surrounding environment, and we have a corporate goal of operating 100% green businesses powered 100% by renewable energy, primarily through rooftop solar arrays and hopefully eventually biomass gasification technology. Next, please. This very quickly, I just want to show a few visuals, just sort of hypothetically making it up. We're located in Woodbridge Township. This might be the building that was knocked down in downtown New Brunswick. Next, please. We process that material through an on-site crusher. The crushers have spray bars at the infeed to the crushing activity and also on the conveyor belts. Next, please. And what we're manufacturing is this. So this is a good slide because you can see in the back sort of the mixed material that will come in and through the crushing operation. We're manufacturing different sizes of aggregate that go back into the economic mainstream as products for road-based construction. And of course, what we're doing is recycling post-consumer secondary materials, the old building, road, parking lot, and bridge versus new quarried stone that would come out of a quarry. Next, please. Well, we also at Bayshore operate a low temperature thermal desorption unit for non-hazardous petroleum contaminated soil. That is a source operation that's under our Air Title V permit. We do have a bag house. We do have a dust management plan. I just didn't want to sort of skip over it since we do have it in Bayshore. This is very unusual. Most Class B operations don't have a low temperature operation and are strictly processing concrete, asphalt, brick, and block through crushers. Next, please. I wanted to spend some time, and Commissioner LaTourette had mentioned he really wanted to hear mitigating measures that are in place. And boy, I really thought Ken Ratzman did a terrific job in framing mitigation measures that can be taken for fugitive dust, as did Dan Cuddy as well. Just so for Bayshore, I'll quickly go through these. Obviously, we have hours of operation. I think Ken had shown a picture in South Camden of a night operation. I'm sure that happened, but that is highly unusual. We only operate during the day. Our low temperature thermal facility, I did mention, is source controlled with a bag house and a dust management plan. As I mentioned, we have water spray misters on our crusher operation for the infeed and the conveyor belts. We have 100% paved roads versus dirt roads. We have very aggressive, to use a loose term, mud management. We run continuous scrapers and sweepers on our site. We also continuously run all day long water truck misting to keep dust down and control dust going off site. And we do that both on our property and the adjacent road. That's a public municipal road. We also employ contract services for 2 street sweepers that operate on the municipal road directly next to our entrance and the adjoining county road up at the top of our street. Next, please. Beyond those controls, we operate something we use, like to call the bounce house, or a rumble strip. It's about a 40-foot metal configuration. It's sort of for the truckers a speed bump from hell. They have to bounce across this thing. To be honest with you, they hate it because it's a very rough ride. But what it does, it bounces off any mud that was picked up when they're on our site, and then we can collect that and properly manage it as a best management practice. At our entrance and exit, we have 6 certified scales. We have tracking pads. The industry name is FODS. It also will knock off any excess mud being on the site. For stormwater controls, we have inlet and outlet fabric filters, use other structural best practices or chambers that hold water and other operational BMPs, hay bales, and so forth. We do have 8 different outfall monitoring locations that have to be monitored on a quarterly basis with results submitted to the department. And primarily what we're looking at as a surrogate for dust generation would be total suspended solids. You have to do annual reporting as well, and we have regular compliance inspections from the Division of Solid and Hazardous Waste, Air, Stormwater Management, and Middlesex County CHA. And again, as Dr. Lumbach had framed very well, we're also under OSHA requirements for worker safety. Next, please. I did want to just spend a moment on the OSHA compliance. Back in 2013, OSHA published a respirable crystalline silica rule. And once again, Dr. Lumbach really, I think, covered that very well. We're looking at fugitive emissions and concerns for crystalline silica as a worker safety issue. Mike Eggington had asked a great question about sort of broader engagement within the industry. In our case, we have a very active National Construction and Demolition Recycling Association. Very proud to say that our owner, Valerie Montecalvo, was on the board of trustees for 10 years and served 2 years as the president of that association. And we did participate through the CDRA with an industry consortium called the Construction Industry Safety Coalition during the rulemaking from OSHA. It was a very significant proceeding. It took round numbers 3 years to go from proposal to adoption of the OSHA rules. They did wind up through that proceeding lowering the permissible exposure limit for crystalline silica from 250 micrograms per cubic meter down to 50 with an action level of 25 micrograms per cubic meter. The point being, they looked at the issue of crystalline silica from the entire construction industry, and they did significantly lower the standard, and they did not, at the end of the proceeding, add additional best management practices that our industry in recycling had to comply with. Final slide, please. I just wanted to list some of the sources for my brief presentation today. The US EPA has an excellent document they put out every year with the latest stats, which are 218, that'll frame our contributions from a societal benefit standpoint to the recycling industry. We also produced a similar document from our Construction Demolition Recycling Association. I wanted to give that reference. The universe of facilities comes right off the DEP website. And finally, I did want to give a link to the 2016 adopted OSHA crystalline silica rule, because a lot of our discussion today is dedicated to public health, obviously, and a concern for public health, and really was addressed very significantly in that proceeding. And sort of the final thing that I'd offer, without going to any slides, we had some great discussion earlier, I thought, particularly how Ken Ratzman had framed the issue on sort of, you have source fugitive emissions, you have non-source fugitive emissions. From the non-source standpoint, the piles are interesting, and I just wanted to comment a little bit on the piles. No recycler wants a pile. Piles are dead weight. You want to bring material in, move material out as quickly as you possibly can. The piles are also, it's relevant to look at where you are, where you're located, where you're operating. Obviously, transportation costs are very significant in the recycling industry. So we are largely taking material from our localized area. We're in Middlesex County. Our county and the surrounding area geologically is primarily made up of clayey soils. So we're getting largely more clay-based type material that would be in a pile. It has a higher moisture content. And that might be a different situation to look at if you're in the inner or outer coastal plain where you have predominantly sandy soils. As the last speaker said, weather conditions are highly relevant. Gosh, if you look at the winter we had in the past, 4, 5, 6 months, it's been so wet, so much snow, so much rain. Dust certainly hasn't been an issue. At other times during the year, if you're in a drought situation, obviously you're going to have material dry out, and that's when you apply your best management practices to put more water on that, make sure that you're not causing any kind of a dust problem. So the point is, we're very highly regulated. Dust management is part of our operation. We have to do this. It is a full-time job for a number of people. And the best management practices that we're required to comply with and our approvals are very restrictive and appropriate to make sure that we're not causing a negative impact off-site with dust, and that we feel that they are sufficient, and really that recyclers just need to be held to those standards as they exist now. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. Hopefully I stayed within my time. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Gary. Any comments or questions from the council?
Yeah, from here from John Valeri. Gary, thank you very much for joining us today. I very much appreciate that. Knowing Bayshore, a very sophisticated operation, I guess I have a couple. Obviously we're focused on the general issue of dust, and certainly Bayshore is very highly regulated. I guess my question or questions sort of cascade to, you mentioned there are 98 other Class B facilities. Are you generally aware that they're regulated in the same way, requiring the same types of permits, air, certainly a recycling permit, stormwater, et cetera?
Great question, John. And they certainly are. they would only operate legally. And I think Joanne Held earlier made a really great point of focusing on places that should have approvals that don't and places that do. Class Bs that I referenced, the 98, are all under the same Class B recycling center approval requirements, which would be those 85 conditions. There's a little bit of variability depending on the type of operation and how sophisticated you are in terms of the air regulation. I think Bayshore is somewhat unusual because we do operate that low temperature thermal system as well as the crushing operations. So we have a Title V. Most will be equipment specific pre-construction permits. Stormwater management, absolutely applicable to everyone. And I would think, and Dan, I'm sure Cuddy could sort of verify this, the 230 individual permits, I would think that those recycling centers should be under that type of an approval. And it's, it's our challenge. Not to sort of to be very accurate, it is our challenge is stormwater management. We work very, very hard to try to improve our numbers consistently from our 8 outfalls and our quarterly monitoring. But the system, in my opinion, works. We're heavily regulated. We should be regulated for what we do. And I think the system in place is sufficient.
Very good.
Appreciate that. And I guess the sort of follow up on that is obviously there are many other facilities that are not as heavily regulated. And the question in our mind is whether some or all of these programs, if they're applicable, are there from your perspective, and maybe you can't answer this because you're focused on the Class B facilities, but what are the real regulatory gaps, I guess, with respect to some of these other maybe not as heavily regulated types of facilities that clearly have problems?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And
I just want to interject. We have 2 minutes.
Okay. There's sort of, if you want to call it, John, potentially a loophole area, it would be on temporary recycling approvals. You can operate under a limited temporary approval. And if you go about that in the right way, that's fine. But we see a lot of operations simply pop up very quickly, and we're not sure if they ever even get a limited approval, and then they're gone. So sort of these phantom operations that sort of start up, you can see them running equipment, crushing, and then bang, they're gone. That's sort of a loophole, but the temporary limited approval is a good provision because it allows recovery of materials on a short time basis. So, I think it's a difficult balance, but you're always going to have some folks, frankly, that cheat and just operate. They don't get the approvals and they're in and out so quick, nobody catches them.
Okay, we have one final comment. Mike.
Thank you, Len. Gary, just a comment. I can attest, I remember a couple of years ago, you were very gracious and gave me a tour of your facility. It's a fine facility, well laid out, well organized, very methodical. I just wanted to, mention that to the council that, having these site visits and seeing it firsthand. And listen, I know it has a lot to do with your fine leadership and, of course, your experience and background. And I've worked with you over in the legislature as well on other policy initiatives. So I just wanted to thank you for being here today in the fine facility that Bayshore runs there.
Thank you very much, Michael. Really appreciate your comments.
Thank you. Back to the chair and on to the next.
Okay, again, thank you very much, Gary, for that presentation.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Our next presenter is Greg Zwick. Greg is an air quality engineer with USDA NRCS Air Quality and Atmospheric Change Team, specifically tasked with providing agency-wide air quality assistance and developing technology, training, and tools for air quality issues related to agriculture. He is a registered professional environmental engineer in Virginia and a member of the American Society of Agricultural and Biological Engineers. Okay, Greg, are you there?
Yes, sir. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Welcome.
All right.
Welcome. You got 20 minutes. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. You bet. So howdy, and thank you for allowing me to present to you today about fugitive dust from agriculture. And as we go through this presentation, I wanted to give you a little bit of an overview of what we do as NRCS. So I work for the United States Department of Agriculture's Natural Resources Conservation Service. And my agency is really the conservation arm of USDA, and we were born because of fugitive dust, and fugitive dust related to agriculture. Agriculture had a big contribution to the Dust Bowl, as Dr. Khan had put up those pictures earlier. And the Dust Bowl is really where our agency was born from, to help agricultural producers make good choices that don't impact natural resources, or that lessen the impact on natural resources. And so we work directly with producers and we work to address natural resource concerns and issues by applying a different suite of conservation practices. We have close to 180 conservation practices right now. Not all of them deal with air, not all of them deal with fugitive dust. But we work across the board looking at our soil, water, air, plants, animals, energy, and human resources, and try to holistically take a look at how we can best put together a conservation system that addresses any issues that might pop up there. Now, I think it's very important to note that all the work that we do is voluntary. So if a producer works with us, it's strictly because they want to work with us. We are not a regulatory agency. We have no regulatory authority to require them to work with us. And so these are, we're able to provide technical and financial assistance, which is a pretty good driver for getting folks to want to work with us, of course. But that allows us to help them make good choices and maybe overcome some of the cost burdens that they might otherwise see. So again, we work in partnership with producers and landowners to make those good choices with respect to their land and their operations. We also are not a research agency, so we have to rely on our sister agencies in USDA, such as the Agricultural Research Service or the National Institute of Food and Agriculture and the Forest Service, who all have research programs, as well as universities. We work pretty closely with universities to try to build that science base to allow us to do what we do with the on-the-ground work with producers. Yeah. And so when we work with producers and address these natural resource issues, I'm obviously focused on the air part, but again, we work across the spectrum: soil, water, air, plants, animals, energy, and humans, as I mentioned, those different resources. And for the air side, we've broken these really into 5 different categories that you see on the screen here, and fugitive dust obviously falls under that first one, the emissions of particulate matter and precursors. And really, we're talking about directly emitted particulate matter when we're talking about fugitive dust from agriculture. And so when we do our work with producers, that work really starts with identifying where sources of fugitive dust are on their operation and what that can look like. And so if we take a look at the different types of sources of fugitive dust in agriculture, it really boils down to these main categories. And really these categories, if you look at them, one thing that you can kind of note is that each of these are pretty episodic. If you're looking at windblown dust, the wind has to be blowing for you to have windblown dust. Unpaved roads, if they're just sitting there, typically you're not going to get any dust off of them unless the wind blows across or you have a vehicle traveling over those. Tillage, harvesting, and field operations. Again, if you're not doing any of those operations, that's not you're not getting any dust from those. And each of them happens at specific times of the year for different crops. And so, again, very episodic in how you look at it. The animal activity is one that may be a little bit less episodic, but also has maybe some times of day that where the animals are a little bit more active. If you have drier conditions, that's when you can get some of the heavier episodes and that sort of thing. And the animal housing piece I threw in here. I know it's not fugitive dust because it is an enclosed structure and you get dust out of there, but I think it's important to point out because it is a pretty big source of dust or can be from agriculture, and we do have some opportunities for addressing those. So what I'm going to do for my remaining time is to kind of walk through each of these 5 categories and provide you a little bit of a direction on how we might be able to help. So if we're looking at windblown dust, really the main thing on windblown dust is some sort of cover, right? And I'm not talking about necessarily a tarp, although that is an effective approach to certain types of windblown dust. But when we look at landscape type of windblown dust, keeping cover on the ground. I know our next presentation is going to be about soil health. And so a lot of the things that you're going to hear that are related to soil health and things that you can do to improve your soil health, such as maintain cover on the surface and maintain good soil structure and maintain a good biotic community in that soil. Those are all really good things to prevent fugitive dust from soils. So making sure you've got something on top of the ground, whether you're using conservation tillage, or you're using cover crops or growing crops for that matter as well. Those are all good things to help reduce fugitive dust. If you're looking at things like piles, we have different types of piles. Usually they're much smaller scale from agricultural sources in New Jersey than you might find in some other industries potentially. But soil, gravel, feed, manure, grain, you can have piles of each of these. And so if you have some sort of cover, some sort of roof over those, some sort of tarp that's over those, when you think about a silage pile for a dairy, typically those are going to be covered by some sort of tarp, and you decrease the ability for that wind to create an erosive action on that surface, and that's really critical there. And then we also have the opportunity to help install windbreaks or other vegetative barriers, and those are things I know some other folks have talked about that kind of reduce that wind speed over whatever you're trying to reduce reduce emissions from, and really doesn't allow that wind to be at its full erosive force and that sort of thing. We're looking at unpaved roads. I know there's been a lot of discussion on this already, and really the opportunities that we've seen that are good for for rural areas and agricultural operations in general are applying dust suppressants. In some cases, you can actually pave roads. If you're on kind of your farmstead area where you've got maybe an animal operation or your headquarters area, you could maybe do some paving there. It's not going to be feasible necessarily to pave all unpaved roads everywhere throughout rural areas. That's just it's going to be a huge expenditure, and then you've got upkeep and that sort of thing. So unpaved roads in rural areas are a norm, and again, there are things you can do to kind of help with those. Minimizing vehicle speeds or minimizing the amount of traffic that go over some of these areas is another one that was brought up earlier, and that also applies here in agriculture as well. In the picture there, you see a speed limit sign, and this was actually on a site in California that I visited several years ago, and of course they've got a huge issue with particulate matter, mainly from a non-attainment standpoint, and so they're doing anything and everything they can try to do to minimize any sort of particulate matter emissions, and this was one of those. And at the very bottom of the sign, it's probably not really clear, but it says it's a dust control area. And so they wanted to limit the speed just because it is a dust control area. And so there are some opportunities there as well. If we move on to tillage, harvesting, and field operations, there are a lot of opportunities here, especially in relation, like I mentioned, to the soil health effort, looking at conservation or reduced tillage and trying to minimize the disturbance of soil. If you've got good soil structure, you're going to have larger aggregates, which are less likely to be entrained by wind, those sorts of things. And so a lot of good you can do there. When you look at harvesting, as you have a combine or any sort of other harvester that goes through the field, either you get vehicle emissions or you get you get dried crops, right? In a lot of cases when you're harvesting, and so as those get crushed and break up, you can get quite a bit of dust from those as well. So timing of those operations, we've seen in other areas has actually been helpful. So when you're doing some of those operations and maybe in a time where you've got a little bit higher humidity, that can kind of help to suppress the potential emissions, or at nighttime even when you've got lower wind speeds. Although lower wind speeds can also lead to, if you do end up producing a whole bunch of dust, having a pretty big dust issue kind of sticking in one area. And so you've really got to watch that as well. Again, the vegetative and barriers and windbreaks come into play here as well. So that's always a good thing. And then alternative harvesting techniques, I added this in here. There has been some work on nut operations out in California and the Southwest looking at alternative harvesting methods. And so they use in almond harvesting and other nut harvesting, like in New Mexico and that sort of thing with pecans, you actually shake the tree, the nuts fall on the ground, and then you sweep them up and run them through the harvester that kind of separates everything else out from the nuts and kind of holds them in. And so as you do that, that's a really dusty operation, especially in the dry Southwest. And so they've come up with methods to reduce that dust emission to kind of run that airstream through a cyclone or some other impaction type device on the harvester itself before discharging it. There's another one that has kind of a water spray system that knocks the dust down, and so really some pretty big reductions in dust emissions. And that's a technology that probably could be applied to things like combines and other types of harvesters, but just really hasn't yet. So I think we've got some potential there in the future as well. If we look at animal activity in open lots, it's really the main thing here is to focus on your management of your pen surface. And so you want to keep your moisture content between 25 and 40%. And so in some of the drier areas of the country, that's really hard to do. In New Jersey and most times of the year, maybe not necessarily a hard thing to do. And so you really want to kind of keep it in that frame, that percentage frame. If you get too dry, too low of a moisture content, you have potential for dust. If you go on the wetter side, you have the potential for odors or other gaseous emissions, and you don't want to go there either. So there's really kind of a sweet spot there that the research has shown that we really need to kind of stay in. And so some of the things we can do are to do kind of pen sprinkling, like apply water or some other surfactant to kind of hold the dust down. You can also increase your animal stocking density as long as that doesn't impact your production. As long as you've got enough feed space for the animals to still do what they need to do and enough room for them to do their normal activities, but get them packed closer together so that their manure and urine addition actually helps increase the moisture content to between that 25 to 40% range. That's really helpful as well. And then we've also, you've got the opportunity, a lot of times when you've got animal activity on open pens, you're either kicking up soil or dried manure or some other material. And so just kind of keeping that pen surface clean. You can go in and harvest either the manure or knock some of the soil down periodically. And that typically happens, at least once a year. But in those cases where you do have some accumulation of some of these materials, you can go in and do that a little bit more often. The downside of doing that is when you get in there and kind of disturb the animals and get them out of their routine and have a tractor or some other piece of equipment that's going in and kind of running through that pen, it also disturbs the animal, and there's been some studies shown that it can also decrease their production and increase their stress, and so you don't want to necessarily do that. So, timing of that is important. You can't maybe go out and do that every day, but maybe every month or couple of months isn't necessarily a bad idea either. And then, and as we talked about again, windbreaks and other vegetative barriers around some of these facilities works as well. If you're looking at animal housing, we've got some opportunities there. Again, I mentioned this isn't necessarily one that fits in our fugitive category, but it is one I think that the science is evolving pretty rapidly on here. We do have the ability to put on filtration and scrubbing devices. Biofilters are probably the most scientifically mature device that we can put on there, but they're also not that great for particulate matter because you're essentially running that airflow through a bed of wood chips or some other material, and if you get too many particles going into that system, you're going to clog the system, and so you kind of want to knock the dust out beforehand. There has been some work on scrubbers that can be applied to poultry operations and other housing, and they've shown some pretty good success. The Agricultural Research Service has a design for broiler operations and other poultry operations, and they've shown really good success, but it's quite expensive right now, as you might expect in something that's pretty much in its infancy. And so we've got some opportunities out there. There's other impaction devices. The picture at the bottom here is one of a windbreak wall system where you've got a wood frame with mosquito netting actually around it to knock down dust from this one's a poultry facility. It works really well on swine facilities as well. But we've got some opportunities there, and I think the science is evolving to where we'll see some more of these systems maybe at a little bit better price point here in the near future to kind of help out. But again, that's where our agency can come in and help offset some of these costs and maybe make it a little bit more palatable for the producers. And I wanted to kind of end here with just some resources that our agency, USDA, has put together. We do have our list of conservation practice standards, and I've got the link there to all of the practice standards. Again, most of those, we have a bunch that aren't necessarily applicable to air quality or to fugitive dust, but we do have quite a few, in relation to the different sources that we talked about. We have a dust control on unpaved roads practice standard. We have one looking at dust management for pin surfaces and things you can do there. We have an air filtration and scrubbing that includes like the biofilters and scrubbers I mentioned. We have things like conservation tillage. We have residue and tillage management practice standards that can be used to help maintain cover and reduce some of the emissions from tillage. We have a field operations emission reduction practice that was born out of California and some of the activities that they've done out there to kind of reduce emissions from tillage and harvesting and those sorts of activities. We have a cover crop practice standard. We have one to implement conservation cover to put permanent cover out on the landscape. And we also have one for windbreaks and shelter belts and to put in some of these vegetative buffers that we talked about. The second link there is to our main air quality page. And on this link here, it also has other links to two documents that we put together with between USDA and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, looking at conservation measures and some of the options for mitigating emissions, not just particulate emissions, but any sort of emissions from agricultural sources. The first document is a cropping and land management system one, and the second one is related to livestock and poultry operations. So you've got the link there that you can access those. And then here recently, just last year, we put together in conjunction with some of the USDA climate hubs, a dust mitigation handbook. And it's focused more on the Southwest and areas where it's a little bit drier, but I think it's still applicable here when you're looking at dust mitigation, especially fugitive dust mitigation. What are your options and where can you go to kind of find some of those? And so that document has all of that information in there. And with that, I appreciate you again inviting me to present today, and I look forward to hopefully trying to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Greg. Do we have anything from the council? Questions?
Yes, hi, it's John Valeri.
John, can you move closer to the mic, please?
All right, I'm sorry. Interesting presentation. I guess the question I have, are these practices shared with individual state agencies like our own State Department of Agriculture?
They are available in every state of the United States. Our individual state offices, so we're a federal agency, but we have state offices, and they kind of work with the local community, and they also have local advisory committees that look at the priorities for those areas related to the different resources, and they have the ability to adopt our national conservation practice standards. And so once those are adopted in a particular state, then that's when we can provide our technical and financial assistance.
Okay.
This is Lem Yeller. I have a question also. It actually extends beyond John's. Is that you have an extension here, you have these guidelines there. Was anybody, or in the past, the government of New Jersey, state government, involved in a local advisory when you brought these out? I mean, to their knowledge, were they participants?
That I can't answer. If there's somebody from our state office on the line, they would be able to better answer that. I work on the national level, and so I'm support for our states, but the states are the ones who actually do the interactions directly with producers and with the local advisory groups.
I'm just curious because in any bureaucracy, things can be put into a certain silo and no one else knows about it. And getting you and presenting it here, I find it to be fascinating. I'm going to want to look at some of the links that you provided. Thank you very much for your time.
You bet.
Yeah, and just one follow-up. You had mentioned, I think, speed limits as being a control mechanism. And I know this is in the context of agriculture. I guess that's just generally that is something that reduces dust when you are driving slower, particularly with vehicles who have either exposure or have material within them that could theoretically blow off.
Well, it's not so much blowing off; it's the generation of dust from the vehicle action on the road. So, but before I joined NRCS, I was actually in air quality consulting, and so we did a lot of work with both EPA and different regulatory agencies as well. And so if you look, EPA has their AP42 emission factors, and when you look at the ones for road dust and unpaved roads and vehicle travel on those, it's really a function of your speed and the weight and number of times you cross that surface, as well as the surface characteristics. And so those four pieces on unpaved roads are really the critical part. So if you have the same number of vehicles at the same weights that are going across those roads and the road conditions are the same, speed is one of your controlling factors then. If you're able to restrict who goes on your road, which we can on agricultural operations, maybe not necessarily on unpaved public roads, right? You don't have a lot of control on any of those except for maybe the speed part.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
That's
sir.
perfect. We're right on time. Back to the chair. Thank you very much for your presentation.
You
Yeah,
bet.
very
Back
good.
to the
Thank you, Greg. Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
Our next presentation is current soil health and agricultural conservation efforts in New Jersey. The presenter is Laura Tessieri. She's the director of the North Jersey Resource Conservation Development. North Jersey RC&D is a 501c3 nonprofit that supports programming for conservation that meets community needs. New Jersey RC&D has a concentration of programming in areas of water resource protection, soil health, and sustainable agriculture. Laura is a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. She holds a dual BS in bioresource engineering from Rutgers University, and she resides in Holland Township, New Jersey. Laura, are you there?
I am here. Hello.
Great. Welcome. You got the floor.
You have the floor, and you have 20 minutes. If you've done earlier, we use the question that your time for questions. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Yep.
Excellent. And I'm right in the midst of a nice big thunderstorm, so I'm hopeful that I'm just going to keep power and we can keep on rolling.
And it's coming our way. Thank you.
I know. So good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. What you're looking at on this slide is a field where corn and soybeans have been recently planted with a no-till planter. And as opposed to a fully tilled field, you can see that the soil trench is narrow and cover crops are protecting the soil. They've been there all winter, and they're now matted down on either side of the row. And so these include a multi-species mix of cover crops. So there's some clover, which is a legume that can also fix nitrogen, as well as some grains and some grasses. Sometimes there's brassicas thrown in there as well. And these practices, so the no-till planting and the cover crops, are some of the BMPs that you'll hear a bit more about in this presentation. North Jersey RC&D stands for Resource Conservation and Development. We've been in existence since 1988. We're a full nonprofit organization headquartered in Asbury, New Jersey, in Warren County. We're dedicated to meeting community needs through conservation, and as you can see, our service area encompasses 6 counties within northern New Jersey. What I believe brings me here today is that the technical assistance our staff provides to farmers, and also then the financial assistance that our organization looks to provide through grant funding to implement practices, many of these practices have multiple co-benefits, like we heard in the last presentation, right? So for example, a best management practice for water quality purposes on agricultural land, many of these are oftentimes good for fugitive dust management, while also providing climate resiliency, and not in the short term often, but in the long run can be economically beneficial for farmers. North Jersey RC&D is a team of 5. So to further our reach and mission, we pride ourselves in building partnerships and looking for innovation, as well as providing educational opportunities. We have a long-standing good relationship with the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. We serve on the state technical committee there, as well as have partner employees. So these are employees that sit within the NRCS offices, get NRCS training, look to help meet our shared mission goals. We also work with DEP through the water monitoring and standards, so those water quality restoration, non-point source pollution grants. We work also with the New Jersey Department of Agriculture and Rutgers Cooperative Extension. All of our funding as a nonprofit is grant-led. So we also have funding to organization through Northeast SARE and the Delaware River Watershed Initiative. And this is an initiative through the William Penn Foundation and the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. And so through this initiative, we work with a host of other nonprofits in New Jersey towards restoration and land protection. And so it's a science-led initiative with a specific watershed focus, and we are one of the main partners looking at ag restoration within the watershed. So just looking at current methods of planting, right? Conventional tillage. So tillage equipment like plows and discs, they turn over that top 6-10 inches of soil, blending it with residues and fertilizer, to create that loose, soft, uniform, aerated soil profile. So this tillage process, it destroys the soil structure though. So you've got that loose, crumbling topsoil, which is prone to erosion, both wind and water erosion, as well as compaction. That oxygen that's introduced during the tillage, it accelerates organic matter decomposition, which then releases carbon. Ultimately, the soil becomes more and more dependent on physical, chemical inputs to maintain productivity. So then you see that we have no-till planting, and that minimally disturbs the soil surface. The residues from previous crops remain on the surface, and the seeds are planted in this narrow slit using specialized equipment. And then farmers that look for that full soil health adoption will do no-till planting with cover crops. So here you can see some pictures of the equipment and the corn growing up. And so ultimately it's minimal soils disturbance, good for water quality, also good for managing dust. Some of the benefits towards no-till planting are here. But the choice to transition to no-till is never an easy one. Farmers can face steep upfront equipment costs and the prospect of lower short-term yields and profits during the initial transition process. So those interested in making that commitment to no-till, which a lot of farmers in New Jersey have or are going to, is a long-term interest. It's a long-term game towards soil health and farm resiliency. And it requires, so we have to be in mind that the no-till management requires the use of no-till drills, planters, as well as specialized equipment, attachments and things that depending on soil conditions, you'll need different attachments. So it all can add up to a significant upfront expense. And just to note that no-till without cover crops is not really seen as a complete system, that farmers looking to get those full soil health gains really should combine the no-till planting with cover crops. Cover crops are grown primarily for the benefit of the soil. They suppress weeds, prevent erosion, both wind and water erosion, and help build and improve soil fertility and quality. They enhance infiltration, which is good in terms of heavy rainfalls like I just had, like a deluge, right? They also improve water holding capacity, which then is good in times of drought. So they really promote that resiliency, as well as promoting biodiversity, which in turn then all of these benefits can go towards benefiting crop yields, nutrient utilization, and it all eventually just keeps the soil on the farm where it belongs, benefiting water quality. The living roots year-round, they feed the soil organisms, which then play an essential role in building that soil structure and cycling nutrients. So cover crops can be a single species, so drilling rye after harvest, or they could be a multi-species mix. And challenges to cover crops often include the cost, the seed availability, how and when to seed, so all of the technical specifics, right? What application method, also what termination method to choose. So as RC&D looks to provide technical assistance, we want to look to provide opportunities to farmers to try the most innovative practices. And we are often led with such questions as, how can farmland be more resilient against weather extremes, right? This is a need. How can cover crops become more economically advantageous to farmers? And how can farmers accelerate soil carbon sequestration? So this is a list of some of RC&D's current, North Jersey RC&D's current programs towards soil health and water quality. And what I'd like to do at this point is just to walk you through a few of our most popular and current projects. So the first here is a no-till and cover crop implementation program. And this was led from the need to provide professional development to ag service providers. Through this grant from the Northeast Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education, we created a practical guide to no-till and cover crops. So we created a manual because there are so many specifics that go into how to transition to no-till and cover crops. And it's hard for all ag service providers, people like NRCS or Extension or other nonprofits like us, to be able to have that information at their fingertips. So we pulled this manual together with some experts and then created this course that we led during COVID last year. So it was a remote course and almost like a book club where our participants would join in weekly and discuss implementation, how to best work with farmers, how to best provide good technical assistance to farmers to then increase implementation in the region. And so this manual is on our website if anyone is interested. North Jersey RC&D also likes to host and also participate in webinars and field days. We look forward to participating and hosting more field days to come, socially distanced outside. But this is just a screenshot of a few that we've held, and we've had good luck getting farmers in Northwest New Jersey out and talking together and learning. We like to bring in experts, say, from Pennsylvania No-Till Alliance or other local experts, and just help promote farmer-to-farmer learning. For best management practice implementation, we work closely with NRCS New Jersey. So there are field offices that we work with out of Frenchtown and out of Hackettstown, and the farmers then can look to a popular program, which is the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. So that's EQIP. They can look to sign up for EQIP to look to get practice payments towards good best management practice implementation. And so this would be technical assistance and then also financial assistance. What we find is in certain watersheds, our funders want to look to promote these EQIP applications, right? And then also look to provide additional incentives on top of that because it's just, there's not enough funding to really make the practice work at times, depending on the practice. There's lots of specifics that go into it. And so we try to identify watersheds that could use additional BMP implementation, and then look to go out and provide additional technical assistance and financial assistance in these areas towards cover crops, manure management, milkhouse waste, rotational grazing, erosion control, like towards waterways, heavy use area protection. One of our most recent DEP grants looks at areas where there's high phosphorus. All of those practices that go towards binding, keeping the soil on the land also then assist with dust mitigation. I'm not sure how many of you may have heard of our aerial seeding cover crop initiative. This has been a popular program in northern New Jersey since 2014 is when the first program came online. And it's a joint program between NRCS and North Jersey RC&D. And we look to enroll farmers in this aerial seeding of cover crops. Now, why aerial seed, you think? You can drill rye, a single species, after harvest, but what is that? It's a November timeframe of when things start growing. You want to provide the best coverage and also allow for, that biodiversity, that multi-species. If you want to plant a legume and a clover, you want to get it on prior to September 15th. And that's an NRCS guidance. So in doing that, we look to then join farmers together, hire the plane and order the seed all together to get some cost savings. And we have been averaging 3,000 acres per year where this multi-species cover crop gets flown onto standing fields of corn and soybeans, and then the cover crop can start growing prior to harvest, which then allows for better coverage during the winter, and again, that multi-species cover crop to get applied. North Jersey RC&D also has equipment rentals, and so we do have a no-till drill. It's a bit on one of the smaller side, but we do rent that out, and it is in high demand. It's located at the Hunterdon County Soil Conservation District, which is also then the Frenchtown NRCS office site. And we have a try before you buy temporary fence lending program. So this is better rotational grazing or exclusion fencing. So these are two of the equipment rentals that we have available within our nonprofit. And last, I just want to focus on some soil health research. So NRCS said they don't do the research, right? So we have found that farmers are very interested in research, in local research. So there's a lot of research if you look towards larger universities or if you look out west, but it's wonderful to have research on the ground that farmers are participating in locally and learning from. And so we have two conservation innovation grants through NRCS New Jersey. One is on applying different methods of applying cover crop, and the other is using short season crops to then facilitate that adoption of multi-species cover crop. And our larger opportunity right now that we're very excited about is a national conservation innovation grant. This is often given to larger universities or bigger organizations, and we're really excited to be bringing one of these to New Jersey, and it's our on-farm trial soil health demonstration. So it's managing spring cover crop, and there are 25 farmers in northern New Jersey that have signed up with us to try innovative termination methods. So how do you manage that cover crop in the springtime? And there's 3 different ways that we're looking at it: planting green, roller crimping, and then the grazing of cover crops. There are farmer incentives built in, and there is also the ability to have some funding towards equipment, which is often a large impediment towards seeing these practices get put into place. And then we are doing a full suite of comparing environmental, economic, and social impacts through this trial. So here's a picture of planting green, planting cash crops right into that living cover crop. Roller crimping, so this is mechanically terminating that cover crop, crushing it, snapping it, and then being able to plant into that. And then grazing cover crops, incorporating livestock then into the cropping system is a great soil health benefit and has many advantages to the farm and to the soil health. So here's just a list of showing of where all the farms are that are enrolled within this program. It's a diversity of farms. So we have some organic farms, some are just commodity, others are focusing on specialty crops, and some are very large farmers, and some have only a few acres. And so we're really excited. All of these farmers are interested in being in on the research. There are both trial and then plots where we're seeing the treatment, so the planting green, the roller crimping, and we're doing a comparison. So it's a research, but it's also large scale implementation that has over 1,500 acres of treatment within northern New Jersey. So this is now for the next 2 years. So as we look towards the implementation, and this grant in particular, we looked to do a research-driven approach. We wanted to work with real farms. We wanted to emphasize the social and economic implementations of these practices. So, what really makes farmers want to do these practices? How can we do them more? What are the barriers? We wanted to encourage innovation. So we often had the farmer lead the type of equipment that they needed, and also be able to help, so the sampling at the end of the day will help us quantify that soil carbon impact. And then I think as I look to provide any recommendations to the council, this third column over here to the right, what's needed going forward with ag restoration and increased conservation within New Jersey is that continual need to provide good technical assistance. So NRCS goes a long way to providing good technical assistance, but they're only so big and there's only so many employees. So they often look to nonprofits like us, partner employees, or others to get the word out. Also, farmers also appreciate being compensated for any yield loss or risk during that practice transition, which is often multiple years. And then that need to fund equipment, the necessary equipment towards practices. One program in particular that may be of note in Pennsylvania, they do a tax credit program where then the Pennsylvania REAP, and so where the farmer then can get tax credits for then and could sell those tax credits to then help fund conservation practice implementation.
You have 2 minutes.
Wonderful. That's it. I just wanted to thank you for the time today, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Laura. Any questions from the council members?
Nothing. Actually, this is Dr. Bieler. I would love to talk to you offline, I guess, after this. I'm very interested in some of the research areas you're doing. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Yes, thank you. Excellent.
Thank you.
Okay, the next presenter, Ed Wengren, is going to present dust and agriculture. Ed Wengren is a field representative research associate for New Jersey Farm Bureau and 1986 graduate of the Delaware Valley College of Science and Agriculture, now Delaware Valley University, with a BS in ornamental horticulture. In October 1998, Ed joined the New Jersey Farm Bureau. Ed is a resident of Trenton, New Jersey, residing in the Mill Hill Historic District, where he maintains an 1860 brick Victorian, a yard, a garden, and he's a beekeeper. So Ed, are you there?
I am here.
Okay.
Very good. Welcome. And you have 20 minutes. If you can keep it within that, we have time for questions then. All right.
Yep. We will be relatively brief. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to the Clean Air Council. I've covered their meetings in the past as part of my job here at Farm Bureau, and appreciate all the work that the council does. The Farm Bureau is the trade association for New Jersey agriculture. The farmers belong to the association, and then we work with Rutgers Cooperative Extension, the New Jersey Department of Agriculture, NRCS, USDA Farm Service Agency, all of the components that support agriculture in the state, to make sure farmers have the ability to take advantage of the recommendations that come out of both our research institutes like Rutgers and then the federal programs from NRCS and USDA. And everybody's discussed a little bit earlier the Dust Bowl and the impact of what that caused in agriculture across the country, and that created the predecessors of NRCS and also in New Jersey, the Soil Conservation Service, which is housed in the Department of Agriculture. So the construction standards that people do to get their 501 permits to control soil on a construction site is also the same group of people that works with farmers to make sure they're doing best practices to control soil erosion on their farms and their operations. So the earlier question, does the New Jersey Department of Agriculture know about what NRCS is doing in USDA? Yes. The Soil Conservation District is housed within the Department of Agriculture. They share those resources, and it's been an important link in the contributions of farming in New Jersey. Understand New Jersey agriculture is different than most other states. We don't have what we call monoculture agriculture. You look at the Ag Statistics Service results, most states are 50% animal, livestock, 50% other crops. In New Jersey, we have about 12% of our farms do livestock, and that's including our equine industry, which is one of our largest segments of our of our animal industry. So you think about Monmouth County, Somerset County, Hunterdon County, the horse racing industry in New Jersey. That's 12% of New Jersey's agriculture. You've got fruit and vegetable production, tree fruit, berries, field crops. So you saw from the earlier presentations, the no-till practices, those all really go to field crop production, but they're also used a lot now in our fruit and vegetable production. So our organic growers do a lot of cover crop and cover crop planting for soil health and rebuilding. And a lot of our traditional high South Jersey wholesale production are using soil reducing techniques where they're using black plastic to hold the soil in place to get the early season start. So you've got ground surface covers and those practices that reduce that wind drift of soil. The other area I think that's important for people to understand is the dynamic of New Jersey's landscape. We don't have many places in the state where you have thousands of acres of wide open land for those high winds. We have a lot of small farms. The average farm size in New Jersey is 70 acres. and those farms are usually divided between windbreaks, fence rows, hedge rows, things that reduce the wind blowing of surface. With field crop production, as pointed out by NRCS, it's seasonal. We have spring now, planting time. You'll see the guys and gals are out there plowing and doing that. So this is the time of year with open soils, wind being a problem. Once the crops take place, that gets really reduced. So pretty much by mid-May, crops are on the ground, things are going pretty good. If you have your spring, the people who did your winter rye, you'll have that harvest and then a soybean planting going in right over using the no-till practices. So you don't get that sort of midsummer unless we have a really dry spell that would contribute to that. Where we do have problems, I think it's they tend to do your field access roadways are usually along property lines, so that's where equipment going in and out of a farm can create a problem for a neighbor. Again, that's where hedgerows tend to come in. New Jersey farmers are also one of the better reusers of asphalt millings. They've taken their dirt roads, they've covered and then sealed the asphalt millings on their heavier used farm roadways to lower and reduce dust. So another waste product that New Jersey has, and farmers are finding a way to effectively use it on their farms to reduce dust because of the compaction and sealing of the asphalt road millings. So always innovative, always interesting what farmers will find ways to do the control things. We have expertise and the research is always ongoing. Again, you've seen just in one region of the state, there is a South Jersey RC&D that does the similar programs and outreach in the southern part of the state. A lot of their work is with irrigation systems and how they are used on farms, moving more towards drip systems and modern water conservation techniques. But we also have research farms from Rutgers University throughout the state, north, central, south, 8 remote farms that are used for everything from crop tillage, production, yields, and then new crops and innovative crops that farmers can grow in the state. So that kind of paints the picture of New Jersey agriculture. They are connected to the national resources. Some of it is getting, as you saw in the presentations, the upfront costs to make those transitions to do these new kinds of innovative growing techniques where you may sacrifice yield initially and then have a big equipment up front. So the more research that goes on like this that can make these transitions easier for farmers are things we find important and will help mitigate dusts and large particulates going forward. The other big time of year would be for dust, and again, they talked about it, it's with your harvesters in the fall, winds blowing, why harvest time is happening, you can get, as sort of the chaff from the seed gets separated, you get winds blowing, but those tend to be heavy particles that don't travel really far. So that's it, what I've got. I'll take any questions if anybody
Very good,
has
thank
any.
you, Ed. Councilman? Anybody from the council?
Again, anybody from council have questions for the speaker? Wow.
Yeah, I didn't have a question, just a statement that I can attest that the speaker does have great honey from his bees that he cultivates here in Trenton. So, through the chair, just wanted that mention. Thank you.
Well, that's good. So how many times have you been stung?
Me?
Yes.
In a normal year, I'll get maybe 5 or 6, like working my hives.
You're an allergist dream. I'm an allergist.
Now Sunday, I tried to rescue a wild swarm, my first time going out this, and I forgot to bring my veil with me, and I got hit. I got hit. And you're lucky my face is deswelled, so I could do this.
It's a pleasure to hear you. And I'm Dr. Bieler. I'm an allergist, immunologist. I represent the public, but very interested in pollen aerobiology. And I'd like to talk to them.
And Doc, you know that they say to eat the honey from the region that you live or work in, which helps with allergies. So again, Mr. Wengren has been very helpful to me in my work here in Trenton.
That's actually true in some regards. It's considered a form of oral immunotherapy if done properly, but you can also get a disease state, meaning if he grew honey and there's a lot of poison ivy, it will have oils and you will actually have a problem. But we're back on fugitive dust.
No, his honey's great.
All
right,
and it's not just Mike's opinion. Mike's dad is also a beekeeper, and he has certified that my honey is really good.
Absolutely. So there you go. Had to throw that in there. I know, semi on topic. So, but thank you, Ed, to you and P. Fury and everybody for again what you do and participating today.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much.
Happy to be a resource for the council at any time. So we appreciate you asking us.
Thanks.
I will definitely be in touch. Thank you. All right, back to our chair, and then we're going to go to the public.
We're a little bit early. I believe we now have 4 public speakers. Is that correct?
That is correct. We are 9 minutes earlier, so we can, if the public speakers are available, we can initiate. Or do you wish to take a break?
No, I'd say let's bring in the first speaker.
Okay.
If he's there, Jonathan Latko. Is Jonathan Latko online?
Mr. Latko, are you online? We can always come back to him.
Okay, let's try Barbara Pfeiffer. Barbara, are you online?
I'm checking if they are online. I don't know. I can't search the chat.
I see. I have the participants up. I see Barbara on. She's not. She's muted, but I see her.
I see Marty Kane. I can actually see him. You want to go to Marty Kane next, and we can unmute him and he can present. He's number 4.
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much, Ms. Pfeiffer. We can hear you.
Well, I mean, I didn't realize what this was all going to be. I've been watching you all afternoon and I've been educating myself. It's just amazing. I was part of the St. Lawrence Cement group in early 2001 against St. Lawrence Cement. And, I wish we had the internet and the Zoom meetings when that all happened, because we all would have been highly educated. So anyway, I thank you very much for allowing me to listen and be in on this meeting with all of you experts.
Well, we will look forward to, if you have comments based upon your past experience to share with us in writing, you can forward it to the email address, or send it in writing if you don't have email access for us to review.
I do. And I will try to do that. And please don't let any other permits pass in waterfront South Camden. We don't need any more polluters in our neighborhood.
We hear you, and we will review it. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
All right. Bye. Thank you, Ms. Pfeiffer. Now we have Marty Kane. Actually, he's visible. I just want to mention that you have 3 minutes, and I will give you a 1-minute warning if you and if you prolong it, I will mute you. So please stay with us. All right. You can give the floor to Mr. Marty Kane.
Hi, how are you this afternoon? And thank you for allowing us to contribute. I'm Marty Kane. I'm chair of the Lake Hopatcong Foundation. Lake Hopatcong actually has a large quarry on the north shore of the lake. And each year the quarry has crept a little bit closer to the lake and has exacerbated actually our fugitive dust problem, although we never knew we called it fugitive dust before. To the point now where if you go out for lunch on Lake Hopatcong on the northern shore, on the wrong day, your car may be completely covered when you come out. So the quarry there, right on the shores of New Jersey's largest recreational lake, is a problem. And we would actually look forward to working with New Jersey DEP on a meaningful dust management plan that might be able to have some long-term benefits. So thank you very much. And we really appreciate the time this afternoon and all the information we received.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. You did it all in under 1 minute. Thank you very much.
Very good. I don't have the fourth caller.
You do
You
have.
guys? I don't have a name for the fourth one.
That was the fourth. Marty Kane, I think Marty Kane was, let's hold on. I'll get it open. We had Marty Kane as number 4. We're looking for either Jonathan Latko or Benjamin Sirocco.
Ben can go first.
Ben, are you there?
Hi, this is Ben. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hi. So
Please,
first off, thanks.
Can you activate your camera, please?
Sure. Just give me a moment. I'm actually in my baby's nursery. I just want to get to a more appropriate
Okay, we would
give me
appreciate
a moment.
that.
Walking to another room here. Okay.
There you go.
Hello, my name is Ben Sirocco. It's B-E-N. Actually, you have the correct spelling,
It's
right?
under the screen. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, sure. So I'm actually calling from Camden, New Jersey. I sit on the Shade Tree Advisory Board here in the city. I also work for the Cooper Medical School in the city as a medical librarian. I want to thank you for having this topic today. I think it's extremely important for Camden as well as other environmental justice communities like Ironbound and Newark. The past year, there's just been one dust issue after another in the city. From many of the different sources that were discussed today. I'm really hoping that some regulations can be put in place to help curb them because they really affect quality of life every day. One comment I just have to make, looking at your membership on your website, if it's up to date, it looks like some of the public seats are held pretty much by like industry and by lobbyists, and you really don't have a great representation of individuals from environmental justice communities, and particularly people of color, Black and brown people.
Sir, I have to interject that we're asking you to speak to the topic on fugitive dust, not the content of the council at this point in time. That's
sure. Can I speak to the topic of environmental justice in general?
No, to the topic of fugitive dust. That's and you had 3 minutes, and you're now over.
So fugitive dust disproportionately affects Black and brown people in the state of New Jersey, as well as some of the health disparities that fugitive dust has caused, as we've seen today. I think it would be a good idea for the Air Council to get some Black and brown people on their actual membership list for the public. I don't want to make I think the physician, the allergist that was on is fantastic. But I think it's unacceptable in 2021 to have almost a purely white membership in such a diverse state.
Again.
Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Fugitive dust, not the content of the council. So I'm going to ask you, we're going to move on to the next speaker. Thank you. Mr. Latko.
Yep, Jonathan Latko, please.
Can you identify yourself? Okay, we see you. Just identify what you're representing.
Yep, my name is Jonathan Latko. I'm a resident of Camden, New Jersey. I'm also the neighborhood association president of Cooper Grant, which is a small community within, next to Rutgers, Ben Franklin Bridge, along the waterfront. I choose to live here with my family. I have 4 children and a wife. My children are 8 and under. And it's a conscious decision to live in this community, and my family roots are here. And it comes with many challenges, many stressors that I never imagined living in the suburbs and moving back down here. Many of those being the environmental challenges like fugitive dust. I cannot explain enough of like how much black soot on my windows or on my windowsills, never really understanding what it is and where it comes from. And then as you kind of dig in and learn through those layers of what this actually is, it's crazy. And so things I've learned are that we don't treat air pollution, this fugitive dust, like we do Clean Water Act, where we look at cumulative effects of like everything that's built, and everything that the Clean Water Act did to clean up our rivers has been amazing. But we don't do that with our air, and that's unfortunate. Second, we get the inundation of everything coming from Philadelphia. There's a lot of industry and a lot of things happening in Philadelphia that we don't control that come this way. And I think we should, interstate law and with the EPA, look deeper into how do we affect things that are happening across the river. And then within our own footprint, really, as Ms. Pfeiffer had talked about, look at these cumulative effects and what's happening. More importantly, earlier, I think Mr. Michael had talked about using some of the DEP fines or funding sources that come to actually handle the problem locally. What things could we do? Buffer trees, more vegetation. How do we spend some of that money locally to actually right the injustices that have been here long before I was here, but continues to this day, and be more creative, forward thinking to actually solve the problems and not just scold after the fact or try to undo things that already happened. And I'd like to continue the conversation anytime if anybody wants to.
Okay, thank you very much.
Right. All speakers are invited, all the public are invited to provide any suggestions in writing by the due date. They had the email, and we've heard a lot from Camden, very much so. I've never been as alerted to the situation as I am by this public hearing. So it's something that's education not only for the public, but for the council members themselves as well. I will turn that over to the chair and then our chair of the council as well shortly. So, Mr. Campbell, would you like any final words before we go back to our chair of the council?
The only final words I have, it was a great group of presenters. I learned a lot today, and I was very happy to be here. I'm going to turn it back to you and the chairman.
Okay, John, you're on.
Okay, thank you very much.
John, speak closer to your.
Yeah, I got to plug in. Give me a second.
Okay.
Someday I'm going to figure out how to get my.
There you go. You're in.
All right, so I appreciate all the speakers coming today. This has been a very productive meeting. We will take, as Mayor Campbell said, all your information under advisement. You do have an ability to submit additional comments, or for those who have not commented, to submit comments by May 1st. I think with that, I do not believe there's any other further business of the council. So I am actually going to entertain our motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Wait. No one can take my position here. Wait a minute. So moved.
Okay. Second?
Second.
There we go.
Anybody opposed? Okay, we stand adjourned. And again, thank you for all of our speakers and participants in our meeting today. Very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well done, Bob and Len. Thanks for your hard work.
Good job.
Thank you all. Good job, everybody. Really good.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, council. We'll stop the recording now.